Welcome to the next question. I'm Chi-Chi.
I'm Austin.
And I'm Jenny.
Chi-Chi, who have we got today?
We have the great Charlene Carruthers with us today. She's a Black queer feminist community organizer. She's an author. She was one of the co-founders of the Black Youth Project 100, which really worked to bring together young Black activists around the country and to start, looking at how do we create a more just world and a world where, people live free regardless of their skin color. And so she was amazing. I mean, she's got, pretty much any major protest in her last 3 years. She's been there and been a part. Yeah, and her stories and what she shared with us, I think it really helped to give me I think a lot of times we look at a protest and we just say, okay, everybody just showed up and they, marched. And but she really gets into what does it mean to set this up? What's all the work that goes on behind the scenes, the preparation, and even just the soul care that you need to be able to do this work. Yeah. And so it was really, I feel like I learned a lot about, movement building and coalition building. And she's just an amazing, amazing leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this was the conversation that I maybe walked into with the most nerves around, quite honestly. I was really intimidated sitting down with her. And one of my big takeaways was how she is modeling through her work and through the way she lives her life of creating in whatever sphere she's in, creating the world that she wants to live in. And so I love how she talks about checking in with her people as they're preparing for a protest and making sure that there's consent along the way. That was something that really just stood out to me. It's not just the final product that she's interested in. Right. She's really interested in the process along the way. And there were lots of things that I connected with in that. And she's just cool. She was just cool to be around.
Yeah, community organizers just blow me away.
Yeah.
But it's really easy for them to get painted as just one thing. Just one person with one bullhorn at one protest. And I think Charlene gave us an inside view into what it really means to be an organizer.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that she came and hung out with us.
Yeah, me too. And I think it was a reminder of how crucial this role is in our fight towards equity. All the different pieces that go together that help us move forward. And I was just really excited that she came and shared her time with us.
Yeah, totally. Should we get started?
Let's get started. It's time for the next question. You write that one of your earliest experiences with power was at the welfare office with your mother and hearing your father tell stories about people that he had trained receiving promotions over him. Can you tell us just how that story impacted you and what it taught you about your family and really about yourself at the same time?
I just won't forget it. And going into that office as a child, remembering where it was, how we had to take, I don't know how many buses to get there. Because having a car wasn't always a consistent thing when I was a kid. And I just remember that moment, those moments, because it wasn't just one time, of walking into that building, seeing this very wide open room with mostly Black and brown women and their children in these dingy chairs, and having to physically go up to the front counter. And I always say, I'm little now, I was even smaller then, and have to look up at this elevated, folks who were sitting on an elevated platform, literally.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that was all, now I know that was all intentional.
That's right.
To set up a specific power dynamic. I didn't know that as a kid, I just knew that it felt weird.
Right.
And it felt disempowering. Of course, I didn't know that word then. And I observed how it made my mother feel. And then I remember enough of my dad working at various accounting firms, him and just coming home and talking about, I trained the white man who was promoted over me. And as a child and as a teenager, until I began to learn more and more and more, I initially understood these things as individual things that even happen to Black folks, besides my mom and my dad. But as I developed my understanding of the world and deepened it, I began to know and understand that it was structural, tied to like actual institutions, and that it was ongoing or systemic. And so it's a journey. I didn't wake up I didn't go into the welfare office with my mom and be like, this is structurally racist. It is misogynistic. Now, there are some young people today who would absolutely know that.
Yes.
They will know. They could come in, they could clock the foolishness. They can connect it to all kinds of things. I wasn't one of those young people. So.
Yeah, me neither. I feel like I went through that journey. It probably wasn't until even college, really, that I started to understand the structures. Like there were so I grew up in the South in Alabama, and there was just so much that's just the way it is, and you don't question it. But it's weird, even as a kid, you sense something as like off, but you don't have words for it. You don't know how to name it. You don't have the language for it. But I just remember in this class where we were going down to the black belt, and I didn't even know this place existed. Like that was my world. No one ever talked to me, and I was like, this looks like a third world country, but we're in the state, and that. And now, I see young people and they have all this language, and I'm like, I feel ashamed sometimes because I didn't have that language at that point. But that was the moment where I was like, what is wrong?
And it shouldn't be that way, because I actually don't think we can organize people through shame.
Right. Exactly.
Particularly Black folks. Maybe we can organize some white people through shame.
I don't know. I'm willing to try.
We can get some things done through white folks feeling guilty. But that will only go so far.
Exactly.
It will only go so far.
Exactly.
And so I definitely don't believe, as someone who's been organizing with actually Black, brown, and white folks for quite some time, shame will only maybe get somebody in the door, but it won't keep folks in the door. And so I'm deeply invested in building, helping to build leadership and movements where folks aren't shamed for not coming out of the womb, understanding cis heteropatriarchal violence and all of cis hetero capitalist patriarchal, whatever Bell Hooks told us. Because she was right. She's right. Whatever she said, whatever Bell Hooks said, not everybody knows those things, even if you live it.
Right.
That's right.
Exactly.
Even if you live it, you don't necessarily know. So, but that's our work. That's part of the work of community organizing. It's a part of the work that I see myself as a movement educator and facilitator, is bringing people along, and not this bland sense of meeting people where they are, because frankly most of us aren't where we should be. So there has to be some level of saying, hey, let's talk about where you are and where you want to be, kind of thing, and let's meet each other on that journey. That's what I'm invested in. And
that's so important, because I think we sometimes assume that people want to be at a certain place, but I've learned the hard way that no, some people are just I'm comfortable where I am. But I love that question, asking where do you want to go, because if they're not willing to, you're just dragging something that is, you're just frustrating yourself at that point. So that's a great question. I love that. Yeah.
I love, even just when I was listening to some of your interviews, that you talked about how you felt like you were behind. And I was like, oh my gosh, if Charlene is behind.
Absolutely.
The rest of us have no hope.
I know.
Oh, I tell people all the time, and I even talked about it in my book Unapologetic, that I feel that I have peers and colleagues who are much well-read, or more well-read than I am. And it's a journey, and most people who will hear me talk or read anything I write, wow, she knows all these things. And no, there's still a lot of things I don't know. And that's why I have to read, and I have to listen to people, and traveling has played a major role throughout my life in my political development.
Where are some of the places you've been that have been really, I know you talk a little bit about being in Palestine, which I've had the opportunity to go there, and I know it's just it revolutionized my thinking about so many things. But I just love to hear about what you've learned and experienced.
So the first time I traveled out of the country was to South Africa when I was 18 years old. Wow. And it changed my life in so many ways. Now, I do, now that I've been back to South Africa since, because the first time I was there, now I'm aging myself, letting y'all know how old I am. It was 2000 and, what year was it? Yikes, 2004. Okay. And I was 18 years old. I think I was still 18 or 19, on my way to 19. And we went and we studied contemporary politics in South Africa for about, it was like almost a month. Wow. And while being there, we traveled a little bit across the country. We were in Cape Town, Johannesburg, and also in Durban, and maybe some places like outside of those areas. For me, it situated how I understood the conditions of Black people and racism, specifically because that's where my politics were at that time, in a global context, or just outside of the U.S. Right. And being in South Africa at 18, 10 years post the legal or technical ending of apartheid. Apartheid still exists in South Africa in many ways. And being there 10 years later, 10 years after Mandela's election, and just seeing those things and listening to people really transformed how I thought about the world and my own experiences, coming from the very racially, economically, the two things together, segregated city of Chicago, growing up here. And going back in between 2004, I was back there for the first time in maybe 2016 or 17 or 18, one of those years. Some in the past couple of years, it was my first time back in over 10 years. Very different experience. I had a different set of critiques, understandings, a different analysis, like understanding the fiction of the Rainbow Nation. I didn't understand that when I was 18 years old, but going back at 30 plus, it was very, very different. Having experienced things, having traveled. At that point, I think I'd been to Ghana, I'd been to Palestine, I'd been to China, Hong Kong, I've been over Central America. I've been to Haiti. I mean, especially after going to Haiti, that changed a lot for me. So it's all those experiences. And even if it's not a political trip, it's that because I've been like taught how to look at cities and how to look at neighborhoods, like it just automatically comes from me now that I look at things and I ask particular questions that I didn't know to ask before. And so travel has changed my life.
What are some of those questions that you ask?
Oh, so, I'm from Chicago. So I look on literally, if I am traveling in a particular place and I see from one block to the next that the lawns are different. Yes, right. Just the lawns are different. The landscaping is different, or the conditions of the homes, or is there a gas station in the residential area? What are the electrical lines like? I'll ask questions about in some places, like in Cuba, billboards are not a thing. Right. So I was in Cuba for the first time last year. In Ghana, there are billboards everywhere, and they're billboards of what blows my mind still to this day, and this will probably get me in trouble. I think I've said it before, but like the whitest of white Jesus that I have ever seen in my life. Because when I travel in South America and Central America and the Caribbean, Jesus has some brown in his skin. He had a little brown in his skin. Not as dark as me typically, it was something else. And so it made me ask questions about the role of organized religion in Ghana. And what does it mean for a nation that is has been central to Pan-Africanism? For Jesus to not even have a little tint in his skin. Just a little bit, because just a little bit. You go to parts of Chicago, Jesus is gonna be brown. That's right. At least brown. Okay, so because people oftentimes mirror themselves to a certain extent. And so it was very striking to see that, and it just led to a lot of other questions, and I learned a lot more about the overall role of organized religion in Ghana and in West Africa. So seeing things allowed me to ask questions that I would have asked when I was 18 years old. So yeah.
I'm realizing more and more how often we have to give ourselves grace for not knowing everything all the time.
That's right.
And
being willing, not just willing to change our minds, but being able to say, I'm not perfect. Like, this is a journey that I'm on.
That's right.
And it's okay and good and natural for me to change my mind to ask new questions or to have new definitions, new phrasing, new wording, and to not be so quick to beat ourselves up for not knowing everything all the time right now.
Totally. Well, I think that shows that you're open to growth. You're open to be challenged. You're open to those things other than just being like, nope, I'm in this position. I'm comfortable in it. I know it well, so I can't change. Right. So that doesn't feel like progress. In your book, Unapologetic, this is kind of a segue from a little bit what we were just talking about. You write that movement building is spiritual work. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. When I think about movement building being spiritual work, that means automatically that it requires me and other people, if you see it that way, and some people don't even see it that way, but I see it in them, to be connected to things outside of yourself. And so that could be connected to people, connected to land, connected to your ancestors, connected to divinities or divine entities, whatever it is that you believe in, outside of just you as a person. And so that can happen at a direct action. For me, I've had some like deeply spiritual experiences in being in like extremely tense situations, be it in Charlotte, North Carolina, during the Charlotte uprising, after Keith Lamont Scott was killed by a police officer there.
I'd love to talk about your participation in protests a little bit. I think mostly because protests through media are so often demonized, right? And therefore the people are too. So it's always about what's being destroyed and who's in danger. And the truth is, it's the protesters who are in the most danger, right?
Oh yeah.
So I'm so curious to know, one, how do you prepare for entering such a dangerous space? And then what do you do for yourself when you're safe again?
That's such a great question. I always tell people that when we go to actions or protests, we are coming with clipboards or poster boards and bullhorns and maybe water bottles, things like that. That's what we're coming with. If you're in an uprising situation, and unfortunately that we've been in several times in the past several years, you may have goggles and a face mask, and you may have milk of magnesia and things like that in preparation for pepper spray or tear gas or something. And I was just thinking about this the other day, how absurd that is. That we've had to do that in this world, in this day and age. And it is unfortunately not even the worst of the worst. I mean, just read the news about over 100 Sudanese people being killed just this past week. And they're about to go on a general strike now. And they know what is like at stake, what they're risking. And so what has always been important for us in these situations before we head out to anything is to make it, and even while we're there, is for it to be as much as possible a continuous process of consent. And we did that when we were doing actions after the video of Laquan McDonald's, the shooting, the killing of Laquan McDonald was released. Consent along the way. If you are here, this is what can happen. If you don't want to be here, you don't have to be here. That's a practice that we regularly take with folks, even people we don't know. We have a practice of like making, for folks, those of us who are a little more experienced or aware, we have a practice of letting people know what's happening here and that there's always an option for you not to be here. And before like any escalations, there's at least the way we do things, the things that I've been involved in, the escalation points always involve, hey, this is what's about to happen. Y'all can you don't have to be here. Right. And so that's some of the stuff, and always knowing that the only way that any semblance of safety is going to happen is if we are with each other. And we always have like a bare minimum like safety plan of like, who is the person you need to check in with? Who is the person you're going there with? Don't go alone, things like that. Because you're right, like I can't tell you how many reporters have asked me about some car being damaged or some window being bust somewhere, but don't ask me about the people who are injured, the people who are jailed and things like that. Like it's been set up in a way, and I guess I've been trained enough or had enough experience to know when they're trying to trap me into a question. And can pivot, all those things. But I remember, like, they would ask us about the protesters who were destroying property, and then would have to immediately, like, shift the conversation to one of, well, I value people over property, and we should be much more concerned with the people than we are about a car that can be replaced. Yeah. Right. A car can be replaced. A window can be replaced. A building can be replaced, but people cannot be replaced. Yeah.
I remember being so exhausted just watching the folks at Ferguson walk and walk and walk and walk. And 3 days later, 4 days later.
It was
and I was, right, I'm like, I'm just watching it happen. Yeah. And I'm tired. Yeah. I cannot imagine the physical toll.
Oh, yeah.
Of meeting that power that you were talking about, of feeling the weight of the power structure, of the guns, of the dogs, of all these things.
The tanks.
The military that you're...
next to the damn McDonald's.
Yeah, they had tanks out there. I wasn't out there as long as other people were, by any means, but I was out there for several days. Yeah. And it was exhausting. Like at one point, like they would quarantine folks into like only one section. You can only go here. If you move out of here, then this thing is gonna happen. And it was a lot.
So you're talking about trauma, and I mean, just hearing you talk about all those things in succession is just like overwhelming, even just listening to it. What does self-care even look like in the moment, even, and now, like as you continue, because trauma doesn't just leave us, once we've experienced it, we carry it. So what does your self-care practice even look like, and how do you monitor that?
That's a good question. And it connects to the second part of your question about what do I do when I'm no longer in that situation? I mean, we do what most people do after something is like terrible. We go eat, or we go...
Yes.
Like I remember the night during the Charlotte uprising, I literally remember we went back to the hotel. I think we got some food, and like that's what we do. We do those kinds of things. We spend time with each other. I don't work with. Everybody does things differently. I am very introverted, but I don't like to be isolated after things like that. So even I can be around 2 or 3 people. I don't need to be around like a huge group of folks, but we do things like that. I garden. I grow food and stuff, and I do all that. I cook. I love food. Like from seed to plate. Like that's my jam. And I like cooking for people. Spending time with people I care about. Therapy. Good. All that. Yoga, acupuncture. So you got, like, I had to have like a whole arsenal of things. It's not like just one thing. And I really connected to the necessity to do self-work. And I see self-care as a part of self-work. Because if I'm not like doing those things that tend to like my physical self, my mental self, my spiritual self, then I'm actually not gonna be able, and also like I'm not a perfect person. I mess up. I do things that aren't in complete alignment with my values. Like that happens. And so that self-work comes in like, girl, maybe you showed up to that meeting like you did because you ain't talked to your therapist, or you know that you haven't done anything physical in a while.
And I don't think people get all of the work that is done before you get there. And I think a lot of times people are just like, they just like walked up and started. Right. I'm like, this is organized. This is not, there are demands. There's a purpose to this,
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Right. Hopefully it's a mess.
The effective ones.
Right.
Yes.
And I think, I remember when I first got my organizing training in Northern Virginia, I did an apprenticeship with the Industrial Areas Foundation, which is Saul Alinsky's organization. Oh, okay. Yeah, the one he started back in the day. Okay. Yeah, it's a whole thing. I grew up in the back of the yards. I didn't know who that man was.
Listen. You can't be in Chicago and not know that.
I did not know growing up. I did not know who he was, even though I grew up in that neighborhood. Wow. And it was much later when I was sitting down with a senior organizer doing a one-on-one to figure out if I was going to go work with them. And he was like, "Where'd you grow up?" And I was like, "Back of the yards, Chicago." He was like, "Huh?" I was like, "Oh yeah, okay, him, that guy, cool." And one of the lead organizers told me that good organizing is so much like theater. It's like theater. And if you think of it, if you think of the actors, you think of the arc of the story you want to tell, you think of the production, what does it need to look like, how is the stage set, all of those things. Like when you get to a press conference or you get to a public meeting or some type of action or you're doing a lobby visit, there's so much theater to that. And it takes practice. You practice, you rehearse, and all those things. And you have directors, you have set managers, you have press, you have all of that. And I've taken that lesson with me throughout my work in thinking about the public work that we do in many ways as theater. And another senior organizer at the time when I was there, she actually, she was in theater for years before she became an organizer. Interesting. And so, you had theater kids.
Right.
Theater kids. I feel like a lot of activists and organizers aren't too different from the theater kids.
That's so interesting. I've never really thought about that, but that is a great...
The rehearsal, all the roles you're playing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. This isn't improv. We're not showing up and saying, what are we doing?
And then some improv will come.
That's true. That's true.
Right? Yeah, so it's a mixture of both scripted and then there's improv that has to happen.
Yeah.
And I used to do theater and stuff like acting when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I used to do oratory, all those things. Yeah. So all those things come into play.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. People, including myself, were outraged because this young black man was killed, was shot 16 times. Right. I didn't watch the video. No. The day it was released, I didn't actually see the video of him being shot and killed until maybe this year when I was watching the documentary. And even then, I still looked away. Yeah. Right. And so the outrage that you see from people, the desire for something different that you see from people, more often than not is because they just connect to this story, even if they didn't know the person. Right. I didn't know him. Right. I didn't know Rakia. Right. We know it's connecting to their story and then also saying we don't want this to happen again. Yes. Exactly. We don't want this to happen again to anyone else. And that actually the anger that we have is righteous. And so, the police officer who killed Laquan McDonald was found guilty and he's in prison, Jason Van Dyke. And lots of people asked, so how do you feel about this? Afterwards. And I said, first, I hope that this brings Laquan's family and friends some kind of peace. First, I hope that for them. Because those are people who matter the most. The people in relationship with him. For me personally, this isn't justice. Because Laquan should be here. That's right. He should be here. And a cop spending 7 years in prison doesn't change any of that. I think it was 7. Yeah. I think it was 7 years. I could have that number wrong. But that doesn't change anything structurally. Yeah. It doesn't give resources to the North Lawndale community. It doesn't transform the power relationship between the Chicago Police Department and the broader community. Yes. It doesn't fund the things that we need. It doesn't reopen the mental health facilities that Rahm Emanuel closed. It doesn't do any of those things. That's why I say I hope it brings his family some resolve and some peace. That's the most I can hope for out of the situation, that it does something for them.
So in what you were asking for, was any of it to indict the officer? Or that's kind of off limits?
So organizationally, not until actually more recently. I think there was a shift in the local leadership and struggle around the indictment for folks. But our original asks were not that.
Yeah. That's helpful. If you had a magic wand and you could just remove one barrier from your from your work as an activist, what would you remove?
Oh, wow. If I had a magic wand, I would remove, I think, that's really tough. Capitalism, racial capitalism, racial capitalism. And just how much it impacts the way we move and promotes or encourages people to move through a spirit of scarcity and fear. And particularly, like when I say racial capitalism, all capitalism is racialized. There's no such thing as like race neutral capitalism. Black folks' relationship to money and brown folks' relationship to money like absolutely impacts the way we do our work. Like you can't come to a meeting like the however many meetings we have because you have to work. Or if you don't have to work and you have children, the organization needs to have funds to set up childcare or have volunteers, but we don't just want to have babysitters, we want people who actually engage children. And that all costs money, and the stress that people bring in because they can't sustain themselves or just the anxiety that people have is real. And so I think that's what I would do. I
want to give you that wand. I don't know where it is.
Like Harry Potter.
We're just gonna, I think it's just a spell. I don't know. No, I wish it was that easy.
That's right.
That's you see how it plays out. That it's not just in one area. It's here and it's here and it's here.
That's right.
And it's keeping people.
And then you add gender, which is also, I wish there were a word. Maybe I need to write it like most intellectuals create words, but a word to like really capture how capitalism is deeply gendered as well. Racialized capitalism, gender, like you can't talk about one without talking about the other. Like it's always there, and so much of the work I do is actually led by Black women.
That's right.
So Black trans and gender nonconforming folk, and so gender is always a factor.
Yeah, it's so intersectional, all the work that you do, and so it's hard to capture it in like one. There's no like easy like short answer for it because you're talking about so many different layers that hit us all the time. So
That's right.
So can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on right now, and then maybe some of your hopes for what's next?
Sure. So right now, I'm working on a couple different writing projects and really trying to find out what I'm most interested in, what I have the most energy around. Because I wrote a whole book proposal on something, and I was like, oh, that's not the book I want to write anymore.
I hate it when that happens.
Right? I'm like, I don't want to write this right now. I'm actually really interested in exploring multimedia projects around food and land and the intersections of food, politics, and culture. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. But I feel that I already really enjoy and think I'm good at relaying really complex issues to people or complex problems and moving people through conversations in ways that bring all of us to a deeper understanding and deeper connection. And so that's one thing that I'm trying to figure out. So maybe by the time everyone sees this, it'll be a real thing.
We'll have the update.
It'll be a real thing. It'll be a real thing.
Yeah.
And the second thing that I'm working on is building out a leadership development organization. Because after spending all these years working with people across this country and across the world, people simply do not have access to trainings and learning communities to the scale that we need them at. Now, of course, there are training organizations that exist. Frankly, no organization can do it all on its own. And so I'm currently building the Chicago Center for Leadership and Transformation, which is a locally rooted, nationally and globally connected organization focused on building strong leaders for transformative social justice movements.
Oh my gosh.
And so the Chicago Center will be brick and mortar as we build it out.
Yes.
Eventually. I'm trying to pace myself because it's not rapid response.
Right.
You know, and leadership development is something that is always needed, and it's not an overnight thing. You just don't wake up a completely different leader because you went to an hour-long workshop. Right? Like it doesn't work that way. And so thinking about how to be with people over an arc in their work. And then what else am I working on? Trying to learn how to write essays and personalized writing. That's not how I write and how I work. And so currently working on a short series on my personal journey towards motherhood as a Black queer woman. So working on that.
That's so personal.
Folks will be able, I know, right? And I'm like, I'm writing it. And like, I don't know how to write personal essays. And I'm a writer.
Right.
And so it's a completely different set of muscles.
So what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? How are you learning? How are you training yourself to do that differently?
Sort of reading other folks' essays. Trying to like filter out the like explicitly like political activism stuff. It's really hard. Because I'm like, I've been writing this way for so long. People wanted me to write a memoir, and I said, I'm not ready to write a memoir. And so Unapologetic is part memoir-y, part practice, like guide-y, part theory for sure. And so, yeah, those are the things I'm working on now. And still it's like very different from leading a national organization, like a base building organization. It's way less stressful in many ways, and it has fewer moving parts. So I'm used to a lot more. And I think because I've slowed down, for me, in the past like 6 months or so, I even think like my stamina is different. Like I can't sit in these meetings with y'all all day. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why? What? I'm ready to go to bed. I was in a strategy meeting like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, whoa, I used to do this all the time. What am I doing? Yeah.
That's exciting. Well, we're cheering you on for sure. And can't wait to share, what you put out there. So it's going to be great.
I appreciate that. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Charlene.
You're welcome.
We don't know how to address the fact that this stuff is still in the air. People tell the story like Dr. King preached the I Have a Dream speech and then ascended into heaven.
Especially in anti-racism work, I say Black women are 100% experts regardless.
I'm deeply invested in building movements where folks aren't shamed for not coming out of the womb, understanding cis heteropatriarchal violence.
Prison isn't addressing trauma, it's not addressing violence. Prison is a place of trauma and violence.
Everything in the news is just like beating us down. I want to see stories about Black women succeeding and thriving.
Black folks in a white space.
Listen, you fight each other.
You may not have shit else in common, but you're gonna be friends, right? I love all the warm-up questions. I was like, hell, we're here.